2022 Citizen Sleeper begins with a sleeper awakening in a foreign star system on an unfamiliar space station and surrounded by strangers. Their goal is twofold: survival and freedom. The sleeper must learn to make do in this new, occasionally hostile world, all with the intent of eventually leaving it behind and making a new life elsewhere. Hopefully. Maybe. Life for us begins with us coming to grips with a foreign dynamic. Everything is foreign when you've known nothing before. Our goal is twofold: survival and freedom. We learn to make do in this strange, occasionally hostile world, all with the intent of making the most of our time in it. Maybe finding a place or a people to call home. Maybe trying to make the world better before we can't do so any longer. Hopefully. Maybe. We are always pursuing these goals, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes that goal is long-term. Find a home, make a home, be that a place or a people. Sometimes short-term. Have enough to eat, feel fulfilled in our daily lives, experience joy, however fleeting. Sometimes our circumstances change, and how we view our goals changes. Survival becomes escape, becomes a routine, becomes comfort, becomes shaken, becomes something else entirely. Citizen Sleeper reflects our own life journeys back at us through the eye, asking two very simple questions. Why do we stay? And why do we go? Much of Citizen Sleeper's narrative revolves around a countdown mechanic. On one hand, when a day passes, a countdown timer ticks down. You must complete the task before the countdown ends, or else. This manifests as bounty hunters tracking you down, or a rescue mission taking off without full preparation, or some other event. On the other hand, countdowns serve as a buffer between the sleeper and other characters. The others need time to make preparations for a mission, or they need time to emotionally process actions that they've taken or decisions that they've made. They just need time. Our lives are built up of deadlines in our work and in our lives. Project deadlines. Finish them or risk termination. Home improvements. Address them or your space becomes compromised and unsafe to inhabit. Even events and social gatherings. Maybe you need to steel yourself before a party, or you're responsible for planning and hosting an event. Fulfill your goal or suffer the consequences, be they social, vocational, or physical. And occasionally, we too disappear from our loved one's periphery for a little while to process things. I've fallen off the radar as I've coped with relationship issues, or job burnout, or trauma, and I just need time. One of the strangest deadlines I've ever known was in my first professional position. I'd worked there for a couple of years and was starting to look for work elsewhere. Cultural differences, disagreements with leadership and goal setting, and so on were pushing me out. And I was told sometime in my job search that I had 5 months before my position would be restructured and I would be out of a job. My countdown clock began, and I was terrified. Things were no longer on my terms, and that loss of control, that sense of dread, was pervasive. Months later, after many failed interviews, my clock ran out. I was in the process of a divorce, I was without a job, and I scraped everything I could together in order to move to a friend's storage room 2 states away. I was rudderless, but I was lucky. Out of one new world and into another, I had to rebuild my community from scratch. The building, or the rebuilding, is the hardest part, and often why we end up staying. Because we can't fathom rebuilding elsewhere. It's why I staved off addressing the giant lifeboat mission in Citizen Sleeper. I knew that once I finished it, it would present me with a choice to get on it and rebuild my life from scratch again. Or I would have to choose to stay with what I had already built. My second career position saw me working with some of the best people I have ever known, working through some of the worst parts of any of our lives. The COVID-19 pandemic, heartbreak, tragedy, trauma, loss. But throughout all of it, we had each other, always. It was hell, but at least I knew where everything was. I knew the other people. There was a community, a home, my people. I got to help them grow, watch them change. And then I got to help them pack, watch them leave, and I couldn't follow them. For a time, I didn't know if I wanted to follow them. At one point, Citizen Sleeper leads you on a plant-based adventure, culminating with an encounter in a garden where life and existence take on new meaning. All you have to do to join the chorus is sever your ties to the other world, the world of commodity, of capitalism, of pain, in exchange for the peace of tranquil non-being. But I chose to stay. When all you've ever known is life, the alternative, any alternative, is frightening, even one that promises something better. In some cases, it may be the only thing keeping people tethered to life, that fear of the unfathomable other. Someone committed suicide while I was working at my second job. I was one of the first responders. Through the trauma of going through that, of grappling with someone's choice to take their own life, I was, and still am, beset by why. Why would anyone choose to take their life? Is the unknown not frightening, not terrifying to them? Where I see the unknown and fear, did they see peace and relief? When the world feels so hostile towards you, when does a community not tether you tightly enough to itself and to living? Where my sleeper was confronted with bliss at the cost of their existence, the cost of what they knew, perhaps the circumstances would have been different had I encountered that choice at a different point in the game. Maybe if I hadn't established my community or grown attached to its people or became invested in helping them, maybe I would have joined that chorus. Maybe it all depends on where we are in our lives when we hear the song, and how much it may drown out our fear of the unknown. So much of our lives is balancing the hell that we know against the hell that we don't. Do we put our head down and just keep going, suffering in a familiar pit? Or do we try to crawl out, hopeful that whatever's next, at the very least, can't be worse than this? Sometimes it feels like we're in our own worst version of hell, and it absolutely cannot get any worse, and so anything has to be better. I've felt it before in different jobs, different living situations, that whatever's next can't be worse than this, so I have to find something else. On the spectrum of the unknown, it may not be as extreme as the unknown of death, but what is next is still new, still scary, still unknown. But despite that, hopefully never as bad as where we are at, where we find ourselves actually weighing those options. Citizen Sleeper offers an out several times over the course of its story, prompting players to decide which hell they would rather chance. The one that they know on the eye, or the one elsewhere in unknown space. The hardest part every time they were offered was making the choice to stay. Every time I could get off the decaying station, I justified what I knew over what could be. I took the familiar over the potential. I see times where I've made that same decision for the familiar in my own life, and I recognize those times I chanced the potential, when taking the plunge into the unknown outweighed the fear. It challenges us to go and makes us justify staying. The overarching plot involves the sleeper carving out a corner of the eye and deciding whether to dig in even further or find a way out and off the eye. It is a constant baiting of maybe the grass is greener on the other side of the cosmos, but without the certainty of seeing the grass. I made a big move in my life within the last couple years. Thought I was climbing up in the hierarchy, back to my home region, that I'd have the chance to do hybrid work, flitting between home and office as I was able. I thought the grass was going to be greener based on the description I was given by those on the other side. So I loaded up, came down, and started over again. But when I got there, the grass on the other side was barren, unkempt, and dying. The promises that were made to me were broken. Truth started to seep out past the lies of an interview process. And in that sense, my dynamic shifted from, maybe it's better somewhere else, to, it has to be better anywhere else. Depending on your moment-to-moment encounters in Citizen Sleeper, you may be tempted to leave. That jumping on a pilgrim frigate or finding adventure out in the stars might be better than this. But maybe you've also just gone through the pits, a narrow brush with bounty hunters and corporate agents, or feeling like little more than a tool used by others. And that temptation grows, becomes stronger, becomes a need. And suddenly joining the chorus of Data or wayward mercenary crew has to be better than this. It needs to be. We all have our breaking points. Depending on how far we are from it, or how close or how far past it we have already crossed, all dictates what we want to do next, what we need to do next. When I try to explain Citizen Sleeper to my friends, it always comes down to, they basically mechanicized the spoon theory. For anyone unfamiliar, the spoon theory is a metaphor that helps to illustrate how much energy one has to complete daily activities and tasks, widely used by people with disabilities, mental health issues, or who suffer from forms of marginalization. You start the day with so many spoons, and various tasks cost so many spoons. Once you've run out of spoons, as the theory states, you're done for the day and can't do anything else. Out of the gate, the sleeper exists in a sleeper body, a piece of corporate property that is designed with planned obsolescence in mind. By design, the body will terminally break down and decay until it ceases to function. This is an intentional design element from S&ARP, the corporation who claims ownership of these sleeper bodies. While sleepers are performing as designed under corporate ownership, they are kept functional by a steady intake of stabilizers to prevent that breakdown. Leave the corporation, you lose regular access to stabilizers, you break down, and, for all intents and purposes, die. By S&ARP's count, the threat of decay and death prevents and deters sleepers from going rogue and helps to keep them subservient. That's a hand that the sleeper was dealt. The circumstances of their existence and their body, completely out of their control. Every day in Citizen Sleeper sees you given up to 5 dice rolls that you use to live your life aboard Erlin's Eye. The dice rolls reflect numbers from a standard 6-sided die. Higher numbers mean higher chances of success at whatever task you're allotting it to. You can receive more dice per day by maintaining your sleeper frame. The more it falls into disrepair, the fewer dice you receive at the start of the day. Maintaining your body requires stabilizers, which, like any broken form of healthcare, cost money. To earn money, you must spend your dice on work. But you don't want to spend all of your best dice on work because that will leave you unable to pursue other ventures, long-term safety, more affordable healthcare, etc. So the experience becomes a balancing act of maintenance and progress. You maintain your frame as best you can, but you also push forward against the walls and limits set up against you. Every day, the sleeper is dealt a new hand to make the most of. We are all dealt our own hands too, sometimes at the start, sometimes throughout our lives. Our identity, our birthplace, our skin color, all too often facets of ourselves that we cannot control. Even the people we know, the people we are able to know, our ability to advance in our educations, our jobs. There are so many factors of our lives that we simply can't control. These are the hands that we are dealt at the start, and the hands that we often have to play with for our entire lives. But we try to make the most of it, like the sleeper is able to. They can craft a finely tuned machine of routine, making sure that they are fed, maintained, and fulfilled, even with their limited resources, even with the cards stacked against them. We too get into our own rhythm. We find people we can latch onto. We find a way to make a place, a workspace, a new town or a city, a home as best we can. One of the most fascinating elements of Citizen Sleeper's mechanics was the upgrade tree. The more I played, the less it seemed like a traditional upgrade tree. Many games would see you collecting certain items or cashing in experience points to branch out superpowers or abilities. Citizen Sleeper is comparably mundane, but infinitely more poignant. Sleepers have been corporate tools kept alive by corporate hand and without needing to consider the alternative. The upgrades in Citizen Sleeper are less upgrades and are instead the sleeper becoming more familiar with the Eye, its inhabitants, its quirks, and its systems. Sleepers receive upgrade points as they complete long-term goals called drives. Complete enough drives, and you can select an upgrade. But the upgrades aren't you slotting chips into your frame that grant boons or powers. The more you help people, the more familiar you become with the eye, the more you learn how to manipulate its processes to benefit you. You're not just slotting a cool rock into a glove, a microchip into a slot, or an injector into your eye. You're learning. You're changing. Piece by piece, little by little, you are understanding more of the world, and in doing so, making it bend to you instead of having to bend to it. It gives us the tools to stay and to make the eye ours. In enough time, it makes us feel like we can go anywhere, like we can do anything. In the times I worked as a restaurant server and a theater crew member, I remember getting accustomed to those systems, those places, those people. And part of me could have stayed, but it wasn't sustainable financially. I had everything from a partner to help support, to loans looming over me, to a need to move out of a home or a region that I was in. They were good jobs, though. I had fun, I did good work, and I left at the end of a shift. But they weren't sustainable, so I had to look elsewhere. And I told my boss at the theater exactly that to his face. This has been one of my favorite jobs that I have ever had, but I can't do it for $12 an hour. The hands that we are dealt dictate how we play the game. Citizen Sleeper's mechanics are brilliant, both as narrative devices and reflections of our own lives. The recognition that certain tasks take more or less effort than others, only having enough in us to do so many things a day, being able to use money, funds willing, in order to essentially buy that which would take time instead, becoming better at manipulating a system the longer that we are part of that system. They are oppressive mechanics, yes, but both we and the sleeper can make the most of them. Or maybe we just make enough of them. And that can be enough to both answer why we stay and lend credence to why we go. And you are glad to be here in this strange and beautiful place a little longer. In the end of my time with Citizen Sleeper, I chose to stay. So many opportunities to leave arose because of my actions, because of my choices, my relationships, and I turned each of them down. The I was my home. The routine that I made, the differences I enacted, the people that remained, the people I knew that I cared about were my home. And in so many times throughout my life, I have chosen to stay. The opportunity to leave presented itself, sometimes rose to meet me, and I pushed it away. Almost every single time I stayed because of people, coworkers, friends, family, sometimes overlapping between those categories. But almost always, it was people at the center. This place, these people own you. They are what makes you get up every cycle. They are what keeps you breathing. Citizen Sleeper is a comforting tragedy. Seeing the parallels between the broken system of the I and our own lives is disheartening, saddening, and unnerving. But there is comfort seeing the good mirrored in our lives as well. In the communities that we build, the friendships that we find, in what we manage to carve out for ourselves in spite of everything. I've chosen to go for new job opportunities, wanting to be closer to family, or wanting a place of my own after sharing space with others. I've stayed because of the friends that I made amidst the worst of it, because I craved routine over change, or simply because I wasn't brave enough to take the plunge into the unknown, into whatever was next. But in the weeks before today, I have taken the steps to go, to leave where I am and to try something new. And maybe I'll stay there for a while. Maybe a new opportunity to go will present itself. I don't know. And that unknown is still scary. But I will keep moving forward. And in this frozen moment, you focus on only the next step, because that is the only way you have learned to persist. And to persist is to believe that a future, any future at all, is possible. Our reasons are different, and they may fluctuate and change from day to day, moment to moment. Everyone has their reasons for doing what they do, or for wanting something new, or pursuing something different, something better. Everyone has their own reasons, as many as the stars in the sky, for why they stay and why they go.